really didn't have a good feel for it as you went in, what you were going to have to do, but during the hearings, I kept on sensing a certain frustration on many fronts. My question is a tax increase, my impression was somewhat likely this year, to understate it. Have you been able to narrow down the scope of anything just yet?
Well,
Oh, you guys, go ahead.
My conclusion is that it's gonna be a combination of a tax increase and filling the balance of the deficit with cash from reserve. And we're probably gonna be in the $2.5 to $2.6 million range, and a combination that hasn't been worked out yet of those two things, tax increase and cash from the reserve, will be the way of closing the deficit.
So a mill, correct me if I'm wrong, now raises $9.some million.
9.2.
There are other things involved here, cost with children and youth and things of that nature. So we're looking at an increase of less than a mill. So the 2.6 is really what you're looking at making up, which could be as much as, say, 3.3.
No, as Bob said, we're going to put probably $1.5 million of cash on hand towards that, so that diminishes that significantly.
So maybe closer to 2 or 2/10. Something. Also, you have this increasing burden with Cedar Haven. I believe the last number I heard was $15,000 of financial drain per day to keep it up and running. Are you actually now coming forth and considering that maybe a sale is the best way to proceed? Because I know nobody wants to really do something like that. Mrs. Litz has been demonstratively so.
You're gonna ask all three of us. My answer would be that this morning we concluded that we are going to exhaust every effort by hiring someone to do a study, independent study of the expense side of the ledger at Cedar Haven, to see if there would be enough possible savings to continue the operation without such a heavy support from the county. That's what we concluded this morning.
Say that from my perspective, I'm certainly willing to do that, to follow through and have that study, but I can't imagine how we can generate savings at Cedar Haven to not only to meet the present expenses, but to meet the burden of the pension, which amounts to about $11 million at Cedar Haven. Where that money would come from in savings is a total, it vaporizes as far as I'm concerned.
What we're attempting to do, except I don't want to step on Joel if you wanted to respond.
Oh, go ahead, that's all right.
What we're trying to do is to exhaust every possibility so that when we make the decision that it is the right one for the county and for the residents of Cedar Haven and so on. We would love to be able to have a united decision on this because it is such a monumental decision. So we're looking to, overturn every stone in this process so that we can agree that this is the way to go, whatever that is.
To you, Mrs. Litz, is how many more stones need to be turned over to satisfy you? I mean, is it possible that you could come to unanimity on a decision with regard to Cedar?
To assume anything at this point would be wrong in unanimity because, as it was stated, making sure that we have looked at every viable alternative, because I view Cedar Haven as a community asset for our residents, for of the facility, for our staff, for our county, and once it's gone, it's gone. And so I was trying to get as much information as I could. Earlier this year, I asked to have a meeting of professionals to advise us, and that included our CPA, it included our investment advisors, it included the actuary, it included our attorney, I think, the commissioners, everyone on the pension board, to look at ways to solve this pension crisis. And people all looked at each other, and no one was able to give me any concrete direction, and they're the experts, and that was quite troubling. So I have been on a quest since that time to try and solve this puzzle, if you will. And one of the things that occurred to me, which I think I shared with you, is that our departments are reimbursed at different rates. Some 100%, some 0%, and there's a range in between. That being said, I was thinking our money could be multiplied and grown by making sure that if we are paying pensions, that we submit for reimbursement wherever possible. And I don't know, that maybe others have looked at it in that light before and maybe not. Are there laws that say we can't be selective? I don't know these things. I need the experts to tell me. Along those lines, I've seen other counties who have itemized their pension plans, in that each employee is assigned what their pension contributions would be, total, etc. And that would make that I could do the math and I could come up with at least a scenario. But we don't have that, so I could not do any math. So I was just incapable of coming up with it. And so I've been very busy doing a lot of ground legwork, if you will. And I went to Angel, she was out, and wasn't able to ask for a group meeting because my colleagues had been out of town. And
I was in Italy, but I was available by phone. Bill was in Florida, he was available by phone. If such a, comment was needed. I heard that this morning. I thought, Jamie talked, we texted and so on. I just feel we were left out of the process in Joanne's approach at Cedar Haven to talk to employees and get feedback. And I just felt that was kind of unfortunate that she chose that approach.
Gordon, I believe I stopped mid-sentence. May I have an opportunity to
Oh, yeah,
finish
yeah,
answering your
absolutely.
question?
I'm sorry.
That's all right. Where I was going with my scenario of the efforts I've been trying to do to remedy some situation between pension/Cedar Haven, they're tied somewhat together, is that after the closing of the kitchen, so to speak, I had made a promise that I would seek employee input in the future if there were any more decisions to be made, and realizing that time was short and that I would be asked to be making a decision after a Facebook exchange. I went to Cedar Haven and walked through, and didn't spend a lot of time, but I did stop at the office of Ed Schlegel and our assistant administrator as well. They happened to be out, so I wasn't able to speak with them. But what I did do then was proceed through and talk to some employees and say, if you have anything that you would like to say to me, I am collecting suggestions on how Cedar Haven can save money. Specifically, I'm looking to close that $1.5 million general fund contribution to Cedar Haven, so that all we have to do is work on closing the pension. And indeed, a lot of them, there's answers that, and I don't want to misrepresent this, there is a need for communication, to straighten out some of the suggestions that were made so that people don't feel like they are real solutions. But some of them might have value, and I'm looking to quantify those. I think I had over 60 suggestions that were submitted between online and cards that were returned to me. So that is what I've done, and then of course the list that I was asking my colleagues, I provided them with a copy as well as Ed Schlegel to try and be transparent and not hide anything and say perhaps if we do a study, these suggestions may be turned over so that they can look at and be quantified to see if there is any cost savings in them that could be applied towards our budget shortfall. So that is the extent of what I had done and why I did it. Thank you for listening.
Well, can you really meet as a group with outside of the?
No, but she could have gone to Jamie and said, hey, I want to go to Cedar Haven and get the input from the employees as a last shot here. And that reaching out that was a solo flight on her, idea of going down there without consulting even with Ed Schlegel. So, of whom, we have high regard, consideration. So that's kind of, this is an 11th hour, this is a 10-year problem. We're now in the 11th hour being faced with a huge deficit for this year's budget and for, future budgets. And we're trying to draw this to a conclusion, but we don't want to rush to judgment because we're trying to address Commissioner Litz's concerns that she doesn't have enough information to make a decision yet. So that's where we're working on that.
One last question. I don't want to hold you folks here. You've been very kind to stay anyway. Tomorrow, one of the things that's going to be during the meeting, which I will attend tomorrow, is I believe the audit of county funds. Keeping that in mind, and keeping in mind, Mr. Ames, you said that you couldn't see any way to rectify the situation with the retirement fund and the deficit there. Is there a great amount of nervousness in what you're going to hear from the auditor
No,
tomorrow?
we already know.
Well, what's he telling you then? What is the story with that?
Well, the pension, we're looking at 28 million, and that's going to be reflected in the bottom line of the report. So, I think that financially it's a desperate situation. I mean, it totally inhibits, rational borrowing or anything else. So,
It certainly
backed into a corner.
It certainly impacts on our thinking and consideration of other needs in the county, because with that huge deficit to deal with, all those resources are being pulled away from other things that are being neglected in terms of upgrades and whatever. But I'm just saying that is another part of this puzzle that we're dealing
Well, I
with.
think an example is, you sat through, although it might have been drawn out, but the presentation about the radio system and so on, those are all needs that we're looking at not that far away. And an overriding concern about backup and those kinds of things and location of our present EMA, while we're saddled with, this debt growth that we don't even really have any control over, how can we look at appropriating for those kinds of things?
So it's now a $28 million in arrears on
12 is at Cedar Haven, and the rest would be 16 for the
16 for the rest of the county.
Actually, 28 million is the sum of the, I don't wanna make this worse. But 28 million is the sum of the ARCs that are owed. When the actuarial applies that, and applies the life expectancy who's gonna live on their pension for how long, and that's what actuarial will do. It goes as high as 33.
Thank you, I hadn't heard that number yet.
Sorry, well, I think you have something there, actuary report that maybe Bob brought over, there's a number in there.
Excellent.
Although we had talked about that number earlier in the year.
We did, and that's a number that actuaries do. I'm not downing actuaries, but when you're looking at just your obligation of what size check needs written, it's 28 million.
That seems pretty disturbing to think that 28 million is the Pollyanna number.
Jeez, Cory.
Well, and this shows the disconnect, when people think you can grow the stock market out of this this problem. You can't, because the stock market's at an all-time high, and you still have this, so.
It's gotten a little
Whoever-
better, but
Whoever would say that, we're according to the Hay report here, we're maybe in violation of county pension law by not following these.
funding guidelines.
The ARC never goes away. And that's something that's been talked about for years. I think it's maybe been misunderstood or been just overlooked. But the ARC never goes away. You can't have a stock market return that's so great that it erases the ARC. It never,
Because
the
that's
ARC
an
never goes
obligation
away. It's an
to fund
obligation.
it, yeah.
The performance of the stock market does impact, however, if we're at an 85% confidence or an 80% or a 75% level, as the market, and they're coming in tomorrow too for a report, they'll come in here, we'll probably be about 106 million or something like that. If that drops to 102 million, then that percentage of percent funded goes down. That's what fluctuates with the market, is the percent funded. The ARC never goes away. And when Commissioner Ames talked about the ARC this obligation going to the bottom line, the governmental side of our operation will go to the bottom line and show a deficit. That's the non-Cedar Haven Renova side of things. And for your education, he's applied it that way when he comes in tomorrow. So you're gonna see the red flag it creates, and